What is going on? Welcome back to Financial Journey. So today I want to talk to you about EVs, more specifically Rivian and Lucid. A lot of people love EVs, they just don't know which one is the right one. Both Rivian and Lucid are very hot topics and hot investments, so I do want to talk about that and compare the two. But before I get into any of that, making sure you guys hit that thumbs up and subscribe is always greatly appreciated. And with that though, let's get right to it. So in general though, there's a very well written article that did come out on September 11th. And this includes all of the up-to-date information. So I'm going to cover this and go over and add my own 2 cents and additional topics on this, because you can see it does cover several different things, one of which is history, shareholders and partnerships, product offerings, financials and evaluations. And then over and above that, I'm going to add customer experience and also technology. So because I think that's a very big deal and should be compared as well. So getting right to it though, history. In case you guys do not know, Rivian and Lucid came onto the stock market in different ways. Rivian had traditional IPO, Lucid was through a rollout of a SPAC. So a little bit more of a negative on both aspects. IPOs are, although they are traditional ways of going onto the stock market, especially over the last couple of years, it's just basically been pump and dumps. I'm sure you guys already are aware. Rivian went up very, very, very high and then basically just plummeted down to where we are currently at. I do have the live ticker going at the very bottom as well, so just something for you to keep in mind. But this is why a lot of people don't necessarily like IPOs and see them a little bit more as a pump and dump. You just have to avoid it until it settles down. My own 2 cents. Keep in mind, I'm not a financial advisor. Do your own due diligence. On the opposite way, Lucid and a SPAC, or SPACs just in general, are also fairly negative. This is why the SEC has been targeting them fairly well, because especially for a SPAC, you don't really have to submit a lot of your financials. So that's a little bit more of a gray area. But regardless of any of that, here we are with two great stocks. I do want to cover both of them. Obviously, in Lucid's case, it does have Peter Rawlinson, which has a lot of connections to Tesla, whether Elon does actually agree with that or not. But I think a lot of people do compare these two because they both started production on the exact same time. And when it comes down to it, though, there's some clear positives and negatives. So I'm going to give you my summary, my Cole's notes at the very end of this on things that you really need to take away. But getting right to it though, as far as ownership and partnerships, when they started through obviously IPO for Rivian, they did have some fairly big investors, one of which is Amazon, also Ford, and also Cox Automotive, which totaled around 24 billion. And when it comes down to Lucid though, as far as partnerships or actual investors, the PIF is one of the biggest and more notable ones. And we all know that in this actual article, the author of this clearly does not see that as a strong positive whatsoever. That if on anything, they see it as a very big negative. And typically the only negative about having a majority shareholder is that, for instance, let's say Lucid wants to go to Mars, for instance, or even Asia, wherever you want to talk about. They want to do something. If that is not in line with what the PIF does want, then hypothetically that could just get easily canceled. So again, that's something you just need to factor into all of that. But when it comes down to this though, this whole article is very biased towards Rivian. That's my own 2 cents on how I interpreted this. So this is why I'm going to give you my Cole's notes to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly of both companies, as I always do. But keep in mind, I'm not a financial advisor. Do your own due diligence at the end of the day. So when it comes down to it though, both have some fairly big money that is backing them. So I think that's a good takeaway. We all know that Lucid and also Rivian are going to do a lot of good things going forward. And like I already said, a lot of people do compare the two, even though they don't necessarily have the same products. Because in Rivian's case, they have trucks, and now they just recently have a partnership with Mercedes about vans. Lucid just does sedans. So that's something as well. And also technically going to be SUVs in 2024 onwards, but still, until then, it is what it is. So you do see the product offering as far as what Rivian does have. So the R1T and the R1S in general, substantially lower for the price point. So again, if you are going to compare the two for a investor standpoint, or more so from a customer standpoint, I think the Rivian is going to be a little bit more advantageous. But I think that early on though, there was a lot of negatives surrounding Rivian, especially about its pull pulling capacity and it being an EV. So something that you just need to factor in. As far as I'm aware, I don't necessarily think that everything's been fixed or corrected. I think people just had to accept that it is a EV. Obviously, I haven't really fully read up on that, so that's obviously make sure you guys do your own due diligence. But you can see it does say the 73,000 all the way to 97, depending on whether you choose the dual motor or the max pack. And then on the R1S, 78,000 to 92,000, and obviously there is similar add-ons on both cases. Both 0 to 60 in roughly about 3 seconds, give or take. There's a lot of good things to come from here, and even you can see Rivian is roughly about up there as far as EVs. So not necessarily top 10, but I think this is going to be fairly positive for Rivian going forward. And like I already mentioned, both Rivian and Lucid did start production on the exact same month. So when it comes down to it though, Rivian has produced a significantly higher amount of vehicles than Lucid. So we all know Lucid has amazing technology. I think if nobody knows anything about EVs, nobody knows about what the actual product is, everyone knows Lucid has better technology. I think that's what people are known for, and also it being a very expensive vehicle, very niche. Whereas Rivian, everyone just sees it as a EV truck. So I think that's one takeaway and perspectives people have initially just on those two companies. But Rivian is having a lot of success because they previously took over an actual facility from a automotive company. So that's something that they just were able to just start production very fast and without any hiccups. Whereas Lucid on the opposite end, they are starting completely from scratch. Although will benefit them probably significantly more going forward in later years, initially right now they are suffering. So that's more so the comparable of the two. So when it comes to it though, here's the vans. It does actually talk on as far as the Mercedes, and that news just recently come out about Mercedes having a partnership with Rivian. So I think that's a very good thing, especially for EVs. That's one of the bigger actual partnerships in the whole EV sector so far. So as you can tell right now though, I'm just listing facts. At the end, I'm going to go over what my initial thoughts are and where I think is the better investment in the two. So that's stay tuned for that though. If you do have anything to add, or if I do miss anything, let me know in the comments below. When it comes down to reservations, Rivian has a significantly higher amount. So 98,000, that is not including the big Amazon orders. In Lucid's case, it is 37,000 for reservations, and that's not including a possible up to 100,000 order from the PIF. When it comes down to Lucid though, you do see initially from the get-go significantly better technology, more range, faster vehicle, but almost double the price. So it's very, very niche. Some people really like that, some people not so much. So something you need to factor in, but I think the Pure is the way to go. This is why I've done a lot of videos and why I said the Pure is a very, very big deal for Lucid going forward. So looking at the Grand Touring, 154,000 for just the base model, Performance 179. Then there is the Touring, the Air Pure. This is where I said the lower price point vehicle where it can even compare and compete with, for instance, Tesla or Rivian. Of course, not necessarily Rivian because they're different actual vehicles, but still, if someone wants a EV and they maybe are debating whether it be a truck or sedan, even though that's a rare scenario, yeah, it could happen, you never know. So in the case of the Pure though, 87,000 for the base, 92 for the dual motor. So I think that's going to be a very big thing. Sapphire unfortunately is a little expensive, not really a fan of that. It's amazing technology, just I think Lucid is doing the wrong way of focusing on that, but who am I to judge in the end? So in general though, this is their lineup for Lucid. So I think one negative that they also do bring up in this is the fact that there's only one variation of the sedan, so Lucid Air. Whereas I don't see that so much as a negative. They do have a lot of different variances of this. So let me know your thoughts on that in the comments below. When it comes down to overall everything else, it talks on technology. So I think plain and simple, Rivian does have a fairly good battery and technology for being a truck. Because I think a lot of people get into a truck and they might not necessarily care so much about technology as though it is a sedan. So I think if you do have money, or even in general you want to transition to an EV, you most likely are going to get a sedan. I personally feel that if a corporation is going to be getting a truck or a van using for their own business or things like that, they don't care about all the bells and whistles. They just want a general EV because most likely to take advantage advantage of some tax credits or whatever it might be. That's my own 2 cents on that, but clearly based on what it can tow, because keep in mind, you can even see right here the vehicle weight, 5,200 for Lucid Air and around 9,000 for a Rivian R1T. So I think right now that isn't too bad for a truck as the size and weight it does have. So let me know your thoughts on that in the comments below. But like I said about the top selling vehicles, unfortunately both aren't necessarily there as of right now. So you just need to factor that in. Both are relatively new to the game. So this is why a lot of people, like I already said, I think for the third time, people do compare them. So something just to factor in. As far as deliveries, you can already tell based on Rivian's numbers, things have really gone up pretty significantly. And I think one key takeaway is that Rivian is trying to have a second line, so they're really burning through a lot of cash, especially to add a second line to an existing facility already is very, very costly. Whereas in Lucid's case, they can basically customize it to what they want. So this is why right now Rivian is burning through a lot of cash. Once again, I didn't necessarily know much about Rivian. All I knew is that they're burning through a lot of cash, that they have a EV truck, and that it's a okay technology. So I think that's something just to factor in. That's what the obviously sentiment is when it comes down to Rivian. But in general, though, this is all just short-term stuff. Keep in mind, obviously, they're not going to be burning through all this cash for a long period of time, because once they get that second lineup, they'll be able to produce a lot more vehicles. And one key difference between both Rivian and Lucid, like I said, that they started out producing vehicles on the exact same month and exact same year, but Rivian reiterated their target, their initial target of 25,000 vehicles for 2022, whereas unfortunately Lucid did cut it down quite a lot. Initially it was 20,000, got cut down to 12 to 14,000, and then further cut to somewhere between 6 to 7,000. So they did get cut quite a lot, almost 75% give or take around there. So let me know your thoughts on that. I know that's one of the biggest negatives of Lucid in general, but keep in mind those are some of the basic financials for Rivian. Moving on to now Lucid. So you can see hypothetically a lot lower numbers, not necessarily burning as much cash as what Rivian is obviously in that case, because like I said, that whole customizing of the facility, the amp facility, is fairly easy and not so expensive in my own 2 cents. Obviously expensive can be said very lightly, but as far as deliveries, very subpar, to be fairly honest. And like I've already said at the very beginning, this is one of the biggest negatives of Lucid, and one of the more notable ones as well. It's just their production sucks. They just don't know how to ramp up, and unfortunately a lot of management changes have kind of been the factor of that. Hopefully things are starting to ramp up. There is a rumor that just came out roughly a couple days ago saying that they're now ramping up to 40 to 50 vehicles per day, which would basically mean around 1,000 vehicles per month. So again, that is very good. Still nowhere near Rivian, but in the grand scheme of things, it is showing a good transition to the right movement. Given the circumstances of where we are at, you can see the difference actual comparable for production, because when it comes down to it though, a lot of people want to know and need to care about production. Regardless of if you have a high niche vehicle or whatever floats your boat, you need to have production. Plain and simple. Obviously that can be said very lightly, but still, regardless of all of that, you need production. I always like to stress that no matter what, given the circumstances, and unfortunately this is why Lucid's price is significantly lower than where it should be. It's because of that risk associated to production. So once they do start ramping up, especially if this is very true about this 40 to 50 vehicles per day, then anticipate Lucid's price will go up pretty considerably. So my own 2 cents on that. Obviously in Rivian's case, once they do get a little bit more actual orders and also start to ramp up on their actual technology, then similar kind of fashion, they're going to be getting a lot more appreciation in the stock price. And even when they do, despite their production already being significantly greater than Lucid, when they start ramping up their production even further with that second line, then technically, yeah, Rivian's price will go up pretty significantly as well. This is just a basic balance sheet, just looking at their cash equivalents in long-term debt. Right now, Lucid does have a little bit higher debt. So you can see 1.9 billion. In reality, I don't think that is correct. I believe it is around 2.4. Cash and cash equivalents, 4.5 billion, whereas you can see Rivian has a huge amount of cash. So again, it's one of those things, you can even compare the cash burn rate, like I already explained, is significantly higher, but that is all just short-term stuff. Whereas in Lucid's case, this might be constant for up until around 2025. So that's just, you need to factor that into your investment, because Lucid is establishing 2 facilities. But still, moving on though, both have sufficient amount of cash. Like I said, Lucid just did a also $8 billion shelf offering, so that'll have a lot more actual amount of money. But keep in mind, nobody really likes dilution at the end of the day, but still, and it actually even talks on the 8 billion. In general, this article is very informative, does have a lot of good information. I'll link this in the description below for you to take a look at and review at your own leisure. If you want to read through this and don't like my Cole's notes of all this, definitely do so. But like I already said, this whole article and who wrote this article is very biased, you can tell, and is favorable towards Rivian. So let me know your thoughts on that. I personally like the unbiased option of all of this, because if there is no negatives to a company, then both would be at $1,000 a share, 100%. But there is a lot of negatives both to Rivian and also to Lucid. And they also do talk on evaluations right here, hypothetically based on the total enterprise value over 2023 revenue, that Rivian is 3.3 as far as multiple compared to Lucid, which is 8. So Lucid's is significantly higher, in fact, meaning Lucid's stock price is too high for what it actually offers, especially for 2023. Unfortunately, that's one of the biggest things that people do talk about, is based on their 2023 revenue forecasts, is they're a little bit more expensive. So that's something just to factor in. Like I said, I'm just listing facts, but some comparables between Rivian and Lucid right here, you can kind of see. It does just generally talk on when it was founded, number of employees. So Lucid does have 5,600. This is as of June 2022. Rivian does have 14,000. So they do have a lot of employees, which that does factor into their heavy cash burn rate. Also, key partners, Amazon, like I already said, the PIF is one of the big ones for Lucid. So both have fairly big partners. The PIF in reality has more money than basically everyone combined. So that's my own 2 cents on that. Sedans, obviously, it's just very niche right now up until the 2024 when the Gravity does come out. I think that is going to be a very big game changer for Lucid, similar to Rivian when they do hopefully have a little bit more partnerships going forward. Vehicle deliveries, we already know Lucid does suck in that regard. Then further, it just talks on the cash burn rate, diluted, and everything like that. So I've talked on everything. When it comes down to it though, this is in sum the article. So like I said, I'm going to put this in the description below. Now I'm going to talk on both different aspects of technology and also customer experience. So I think we all know when it comes down to Lucid, their customer experience is bar none. So they are the next level. Whereas technically the CEO of Rivian has gotten a lot of hate, especially when they were wanting to try and increase their prices. They were not as far as accepting any pre-existing reservations. They were saying a blanket, everyone is going up, unfortunately, which did really hurt their stock price pretty significantly. So I think their customer experience is really poor. And I think that's more so as well being seen on a lot of stock forums. It's just in general, the experience coming from the customer standpoint is just below anything. Whereas Lucid is fairly good. In general though, I think their transparency does suck. So there's a lot of people out there who have reservations and are wanting their vehicle, told it's supposed to be in Q2, and then as of right now, it still receives no updates. So I think there is a lot of negatives, but in general, I think those are some small finite lemons that just come out that unfortunately are just bad scenarios. I think the customer experience is very favorable towards Lucid. So that's my own 2 cents on that. Like I said, I'm not being biased or anything because I do cover Lucid quite a lot. And then as far as technology on Lucid is just bar none once again. So I think the technology aspect is very favorable. You can always choose a company, whether you have someone that produces a ton of vehicles or has the technology. both are very heavy investments coming from a company standpoint. So a company can invest a lot of money in technology or production. You technically don't see companies that have both, especially in the early stages. So both Rivian and Lucid, like I said, are very comparable as far as when they just started to launch their vehicles. So Lucid chose the technology route. So this is why Lucid does have a little bit better and favorable technology, and also technically they can do over-the-air updates very fast, very frequently, as much as they want to fix any finite issues. Rivian unfortunately does lack that component about the technology. So as far as the comparable, like I said, it's a little bit more favorable towards Lucid. So in sum though, right now, if you just want to ignore everything I just said about ranting about production when they started IPOs, everything, plain and simple, if you are looking for a good short-term investment, I personally would choose Lucid because it does have a little bit more ability to ramp up production. That's been one of the more negative things of Lucid, and it does appear as though they are correcting that. So if that one negative and one of the only negatives about Lucid is being corrected, then hands down that's going to be a little bit more of a favorable investment. This is why you are paying a little bit higher of a premium, potentially based on that multiple that I showed you, about 8x versus 3.3x for Rivian. So I think it is a little bit more favorable for Lucid, not discrediting Rivian because generally speaking, they are different products. Rivian offers trucks, Lucid offers sedans, plain and simple. So if someone is trying to get a truck, then Rivian is one of their only options, unless they want to go for a cyber truck with Tesla, but hands down that's like going to be 3 times the price in general. So I think a lot more people are not going to be choosing that. Rivian will definitely have a lot of vehicles, be able to produce a lot of vehicles. So I think that's more so a very common thing. A lot of companies try to be a legacy automaker, meaning they can just produce a ton of vehicles, and one of which, and more notable one as well, is Polestar. So you get Polestars and also Rivians of the EV sector that just like to produce a ton of vehicles. Whereas Lucid, you do have the technology aspect, you have the finite special vehicle. So it's something that you just need to factor in. Keep in mind though, Rivian can always invest a lot of money because they do have a lot of money, hands down, that they can invest in technology, which would ramp that up, and they could even technically get into the whole sedan sector as well. Both companies are not limited to what they can actually do. So coming from an investment standpoint, short term, I think both are going to do a lot of good things, even more so with governments transitioning to full EVs going forward. So I think right now both are very good investments, but if you are looking for who's going to have the better return on investment, I would choose Lucid. But obviously that is factoring in assuming that they're really ramping up on production. For instance, if they don't, then unfortunately Lucid is going to get hit quite hard. So let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comments below. Given the circumstances, both have the same amount of debt, so with a higher interest rate environment as well, I think both are going to fare out the same in that regard. So with that though, let me know your thoughts on Lucid or Rivian, who you would pick for the better investment in the grand scheme of things. Hopefully I didn't bore you, and like I said, if I did miss any big components of any of the either Lucid or Rivian, let me know in the comments below. I can definitely address that as well. So with that, I appreciate you guys watching. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up and subscribe. If you do like my channel though and want to support it, don't forget to join as a member. It's always greatly appreciated in doing so. And with that said, I appreciate you guys watching, and let's all make a lot of money on both Rivian and Lucid.